So your pleasure, Graham.
Okay, it's 5:31. Call the meeting to order. We have a long agenda tonight. Or a little. Hopefully, we get through it quickly, but it's a little longer than our usual agendas. Call the public. Let's start with public comment. Is there anybody in the public who's raising their hands who has an interest in speaking?
So Dr. Cook and Seth, if you'd like to speak, let me know. I'll promote you. If not, there's another time at the end, and then there's an item on the agenda that you might be interested in later.
Yeah, I would probably plan on maybe bring them in when we talk about the VE discussion, or give them the opportunity to raise their hand during that session, or they want to be on. I think that there's some, heavy discussion, which would probably be good to get their input on.
So there's no one, they have not raised their hand, and there's no other public attendance.
Beautiful. Okay.
Oh, wait. I got to do a couple things here. I forgot already.
You record. It says you were recording before.
I don't see it recording. Hold on a second.
Yeah, it said recording when I logged on, so I don't know if you already had the recording.
Yeah, let me just confirm that, if you wouldn't mind standing by for 1 second.
No.
I've seemed to fail at it.
You may already be recording, Bill. It says recording on my screen. I don't know if that means anything.
Well, I've sort of lost it. I've lost you guys too. Are you still there?
We can hear you.
And see you.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. All right. Well, at least I'm going to get the, where does it say chat? Not chat. I got to get the wording going.
Oh, you mean the,
Yeah. Stand by.
that's a heavy lift.
Well, it was right here this morning when I was practicing. I don't see it. Do you see where it says?
You're asking me.
Yeah, pause.
Oh, show
hand
caption.
raise,
Don't you can't. On
chat.
the lower right, it says show caption.
I don't see that. I know.
Hover on the bottom of hover your cursor on the bottom left, bottom right of your screen. It should be a show caption pop up. An option. If you hover on the bottom right.
Captions.
Yeah, show captions, right? That's what you're looking for?
Yeah, you're right. Show captions. Thank you. So is it showing captions? It's showing captions for me, and you're
Yep.
saying I'm recording, which I question that, but go ahead.
It says a participant has enabled closed caption on my screen. I don't see captions, but it says that's what it says.
I see them.
I think we're good. I think we see recording and I see the ability to have captions. So someone wanted, they could turn it on.
I'm glad you think that. Sorry for my struggles.
Yeah,
But
no, it's working. I can see it if I chose to put the captions on.
I will. All right, go ahead, Graham. I don't, I'm as best as I can do here.
Perfect. Well done, Bill. Another
Yeah, right.
another skill to add to your repertoire.
And if it keeps going like this, I'm out.
Item number 3, approval of minutes, November 7th, 2022. Would anyone like to make a motion prior to discussion? Oh, I see Adam. I see you raising your hand, but I assume you're not making a motion. What?
No, I don't have that ability. Within the packet there, I had put in some items that I had noted that had typos or nothing grave, but just some clarifications, points of note for committee consideration with regard to some of the discussion. There's been a lot of talk about what portions of the building were contemplated during which phase, pre-referendum, et cetera. So those comments were intended to help clarify some of that based on what I believe the discussion was. So ultimately, that's a committee's consideration, but just wanted to flag those for you all.
Yeah, I think it's important that people maybe read them if they haven't.
Yeah, you want to table it? I mean, if it's, it sounds like it's
not that big a deal. But it makes it very clear. I read it and I certainly could make a
okay, as long as
suggestion that we do it, but I'm glad Adam did it because I think it makes the whole situation, the whole flow is much better.
I guess I would throw it open to the other committee members if they want to, if they feel comfortable with Woody's vote of confidence. We can move forward, or do people want to take a chance to read them now or subsequently?
I'm good with it.
Okay. I personally am good for, you okay, Sharon? Thumbs up if you feel okay. Woody, you're free to make a motion if you're so
I'd like to
inclined.
make a motion to adopt the minutes as amended by Adam from Colliers.
And we need a second. Sharon seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
We're good. Moving on to item 4, actually, just before we start with the architect's update, I just want to give a preface. The value engineering component, obviously, that's what we're going to talk about that. There is one of the big issues is, do we have the ability to move some money around within the budget or off the budget for the geothermal grant? I have a meeting tomorrow morning with Peggy and our bond counsel and several other people to determine, what we can and cannot do in order to bring the project within budget or close to budget. So I don't think we won't be able to make it. I would suggest we don't make any final decisions, and clearly we're not going to make the decision on the geothermal tonight. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, but I think the idea is to just, flesh out the ideas, and then a subsequent meeting, we can talk about it once we have a better handle on how much potential flexibility we have relative to some, play with the overall referendum number and or receiving grants on budget or off budget. So with that said, any questions on that?
Yes, Graham. There was some talk a while ago that the state was increasing their cost sharing due to the reality of the effects of the pandemic on the cost of materials and labor. Were we to receive some of that money, how would it be handled, or would it have the same issues as what we're experiencing now?
I believe it would have the same issues, but it would make for a very good story. If we have to go back to a town meeting for approval of an extra couple $1 million, it would certainly help reassure that. If you follow what happened in Farmington, they did that and they were able to, the net effect of asking for the $10 million, but because they reduced reimbursement, the net effect to the taxpayers was actually the same or less. So if we, that would be great if we can tell that, but I think we're still bound by the referendum call. But hopefully the bond counsel and the attorneys will be able to fill me in on that. But that's an important question.
Yeah, to me that, obviously if the state did that and we said no, we'd look extraordinarily foolish. One other question is, what other options? Obviously we took Ryerson's demolition out of the SD project, but what other items can legally and properly be removed that could conceivably then be paid by the town upon and then have the town reimbursed based on the rebates we're getting if we move forward with the geo exchange system?
I think technically very limited, but but the wording was specific. A referendum had some flexibility in the wording to move money. The fact we have multiple projects covered, I think, implies some flexibility, but I need to know, but there were numbers represented in the pre-referendum that had specific numbers. Someone who's opposed to the project would potentially look at that as kind of, working around the problem. So, but that's what I need to talk to the attorneys about.
Yeah, of course. I'm just throwing out
Yeah, no, I
ideas.
agree with you. I mean, I've been racking my brain the same thing as you, Woody, trying to, what do we pull off budget down the road? We just need some flexibility. We don't necessarily have to solve the problem, but I just want to have flexibility when we go to bid that, we can move a couple $1 million, because, $2 million on a $60 million project is only a couple percent. And we're not going to get estimates better than that moving to the budget. So, we've already moved some of that stuff offline. We can do some alternates too, but there's a limit to what we can do with the alternates as we go to bid. But I think the big for me, the $2 million in the IRA program is one of the big things that we've got to. It's such common sense to pursue that and try to do whatever we can to get that $2 million in our budget.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? So with that, we'll turn it over to Tecton to update for the architect's update.
I believe we are handling this as a combined effort between Tecton and Colliers to go over the value management
Yes,
exercise.
we got invoices next on the agenda, and then it'd just be the more substantive VE exercise.
Okay, you want to do the approval of the invoices first, and then we'll, even though it's double back? I think
Yeah, so, yeah, I'll screen share it just now. So the approval's pretty short this month for 76,274, just with the monthly invoices from Colliers and Tecton. There's a draft motion in the packet.
Adam, why was the amount approved lower than the amount applied for?
So it's a good question. So with Tecton's bill, their accounting staff originally had billed out 100% of schematic design. We're not all the way through schematic design yet. So I spoke with Justin about it last week, and approximately 90% of the way through. So that's why the amount submitted was different than the amount approved, was to align scope with completion.
Great, thank you.
do we have would someone like to make a motion to approve? Is George here? George, where are you? When we need a voice.
I'm here, but I don't have the draft, but I'll
Oh.
make a motion that we approve.
Oh, I have it
instead of
now if
sharing
you
the
want.
screen.
Okay, Woody.
I
go
got
ahead.
it.
Okay.
Once you stop doing that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the invoice packet dated 12/19/2022, including invoices from Colliers Project Leaders and Tecton Architects for a total approval of $76,274.
Do we have a
I'll
second?
second it.
George, beautiful. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think that was unanimous. Sharon, did you raise your hand? Yes, unanimous. Okay, great. Okay, so with that, I guess we'll double back to the OPM update. You guys you're gonna tag team this?
Yeah, so this basically is just one, there's not much of an update. It's just the schematic design and value engineering and management review. So this is the ultimate goal of this exercise is to move from schematic design to design development. The two tasks that comprise that moving include confirming that the concept behind schematic design with any of the changes discussed aligns with the town needs and conforms with the education specifications, and that, yes, this is the project we want to move forward with. And the second portion of that is reviewing the value engineering items to ensure that whatever's taken for value engineering and value management aligns the estimate with the plan to meet towards budget. So basically, does the scope work? Does the money work? Do we feel confident that we should move forward into design development? The task we'll go through tonight, and I'll do a lot of screen sharing along with input from Justin and Jeff and Nick as appropriate, are to go through each of the items that were in your packets and get consensus from the SBC as to whether or not that's a value engineering or value management item that the town wants to take. The topic that Graham brought about earlier, that there's some meetings later on this week, likely preclude making a decision on some of those items tonight, but we want to get through as many as we can. And then to emphasize how important it is to move on to design development with a clear plan and path, we should set a special meeting if amenable to the SBC for later this week or next week to finalize the approval of the value engineering topics. There are several items on the VE list and VM list that would augment the education specifications. Last week, there was a Board of Education meeting where this general topic of budget and value engineering and management was brought up with the notion that there might be some requested changes to the ed specs to better align scope and budget and use of the building. The Board of Education appeared to be generally amenable to hearing those options. So once the scope is reviewed insofar as alignment with the project, ultimately the ed specs would need to be approved by the Board of Education if there were any intended changes to classroom sizes or radiant flooring or things of that nature. If you notice the ed spec list, I'm sorry, the value engineering list has $6 million in targeted items there. That's not the full 9.9 million, but as I mentioned a couple meetings ago, we don't need to get $9.9 million to proceed on to design development. Point being is that all those items that are taken, or if additional funding is targeted to make up for some of those gaps, that has to just provide sufficient confidence to the town that we'd be able to meet that extra budgetary difference as we move forward into design development. And this is the point I really want to emphasize is the project does need to keep moving forward and continuing in the design process in order to flesh out the items that just aren't shown on the drawings yet. Schematic design is by nature very schematic, lots of rectangles as opposed to full building designs and details and things. So it's not really practical to try to get a precise number down when you're working with this stage of documentation. So the notion is that as the design continues and it develops and everyone is very acutely aware of the budgetary constraints, the ambiguities and uncertainties and the estimating process and the design process go away as you work through design development, and new ideas for value engineering and things arise as you flesh out the design. So as we're going through these items, keep that in mind that, although we don't have to get to 9.9 million, it's still important to proactively make decisions on things so that design can move forward in a straight direction, as opposed to ambiguities about whether, well, maybe we want to do it later, or maybe we don't even want to take these value engineering item now. Each item not taken gets farther and farther away from the budget gap that we have right now. Any questions on process or concepts or what we need to do next before I start screen sharing the log and those types of things? No? Okay. So I will screen share then.
Once Adam screen shares, I see to lose track of the attendees. So my suggestion, if you're okay with it, there's three public people here, Dr. Cook, Katie Stein, and Seth. If they want to be promoted, if they want to participate, once you share your screen, I don't know how to bring them on.
Okay, I mean, I assume, yeah. So Dr. Cook, do you and your team want to be made full participants?
Recognized?
Yeah.
Raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Oh, Dr. Cook did. And Seth did. Maybe Katie just wants to watch. Last time when you did the screen last time, I couldn't see them or figure out how to get them on.
Yeah,
the screen.
understood. Yeah, so better safe than sorry. So
Yeah, so Katie will have to just watch. She can always call my cell phone if she wants.
Okay.
Thank you for bearing with me.
Absolutely. All right, so let me I'll screen share now. So this was the log that was developed over the past number of weeks in consultation with Colliers and Tecton and Gilbane. We've gone through meetings on this, and this is the reconciled values attendant with each of these items.
Adam,
Just
can you zoom in a little more, Adam? Just
Yep.
for some people might be looking at a laptop. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the task is we're taking the items that are possible and either confirming them as accepted, rejecting them, or targeting them as an alternate, where it would still be part of the process for design, but ultimately wouldn't be part of the base scope. It would be something that could be bid as an alternate and then accepted later should sufficient funds arise. The first 5 items here are items that were targeted during the reconciliation process. I mentioned these, I think, either meeting or 2 ago, as being items that are not currently reflected in the estimate because they seem to align best with either being an alternate or as something that is just being tracked for cost purposes. So for example, as either Woody or Graham mentioned earlier, the demolition of Ryerson currently isn't reflected in the $9.9 million overage. So that would currently be tracked as an alternate. There's a fire pump that was listed in the design documents, but don't believe it might be necessary. It needs to be confirmed. So that item is being just tracked as an alternate and is not part of the 9.9 million. Similarly, the gas line was an item that there was some strong input from the SBC of trying to target carbon neutral. Ultimately, it's an SBC scope decision, but given the budgetary concerns met at the reconciliation process, that was moved to the alternate portion of the reconciliation document. So adding the gas line is not part of the current estimate value. Solar PV panels was from the beginning of the budgetary process was targeted to be on a purchasing agreement, so they wouldn't be purchased outright. That still is the case. They were just included as part of the rough budget exercise during the estimate process to get a dollar value for them. So obviously the providing panels that the town would own is not part of the project estimate at this point. And then the last item here was the sort of the fancy folding partitions at the media center and the steam room that had made it into a number of the sort of the later visuals that were displayed at a number of the meetings. Those didn't make it on the schematic design documents in the first place, so they weren't part of the cost estimate. But because they were something that people tended to like and were focused on, wanted to make sure that it was known that those were not part of the estimate at this point either. So putting them in would be an addition. So that's why those dollar values are listed as 0 for these, is because they aren't currently reflected in this budget exercise we're going through. Any questions on that or concerns or exceptions at this point? Otherwise, they'd all be targeted as either alternates or just known as not being part of the project budget at this point.
I have a question. The gas line, the purpose of the gas line was for emergency power, right? Or what was the reasoning for even having it in the project?
So if the project was to utilize geothermal power, the gas line would be for the generator and potentially for the cooking equipment. Justin, Jeff, or Nick, jump in here if I've missed something.
But you can do
those would be
cooking
the two.
without gas,
You
right?
could, yes.
Yeah,
You could
So
do a
it would-
generator without gas as well. It could be a diesel generator as well.
okay.
So it is not needed to finish the project and have it be complete. There are ways to utilize it without, do those items without gas. Yes.
Good. I think that's a good one not to have in there.
Adam, do you want to vote on
no,
individual
I just-
items?
At this point, I think not, because we're going to have to come back to talk about geothermal at a subsequent meeting, as Graham indicated. So the way that I will be tracking these is identifying if there's any inclinations one way or the other. So if someone takes exception, or if there's a strong desire to not take an item, I think that should be well documented, and I could put it in the reject column. Otherwise, I will track each individual item, and then at that subsequent meeting, it could be one vote on all of the items to confirm that the acceptance of the entire log as a whole.
Got it.
Adam, you want me to chime in anytime if I have a question?
Uh, That's up to Graham.
Yeah,
That's-
no,
that's fine.
anything
Yeah.
to participate. One thing on the gas, I assume haven't had any preliminary discussions about the gas anyway, but a lot of times they're very hesitant to supply gas for a very limited demand. So I we'd have to pay the full cost. If we were using a gas building, that might be different, but I assume, did we have any preliminary discussions at all with the gas company about the feasibility of even doing this?
I have not, to be honest, I'm not sure what was done pre-referendum, but the initial inclination I've received is that we should plan to pay for the whole gas line as
Yeah.
part of the project.
Yeah, it's expensive. We just actually VE'd out of another project, went to a diesel generator because the gas company was charging basically list price for install, and it was very expensive. And the client decided not to. But, the fire pump issue, you have it as an alternate. Until the water services is completely vetted out, that may not be an alternate, just FYI. Okay.
Understood, yep. Have we scheduled a fire flow test at all? Or I guess, we're projecting it's gonna be extended, right? Do we have any fire flow data? At the high
No,
school?
they have a model they produced, and it's something we'll have to track off as another topic at a later date.
Thanks, Craig.
Also, on these five, otherwise I'll allocate them accordingly. We can move on to the other VE items. Okay. So the first sort of item to take, so to speak, is this couple of concrete items and electrical item. So for concrete, there was some constructability comments from Gobain that some of the reinforcing in the plans was a little more robust than they typically see. Tecton indicated that that was probably the case. So this was a fairly safe value engineering item that could be taken just on a reinforcing within the concrete standpoint. In the slabs, as well as a similar comment on some of the foundation walls. Any questions on those two? No? Okay.
Hey, before we move on, this is Seth. I have to apologize. I have a meeting that I need to be at on location in Branford at 6:30, so I only have about 10 to 15 minutes more. I just wanted to say, if I can, and I'm sorry to jump out of order, because I know you have this document ordered, Adam. And I trust Dr. Cook to cover the Board of Ed's perspective as per our discussions that Bill and Graham also were present for, and Adam at the last Board of Ed meeting. But I do have to run. So I just wanted to say the board did at its last board meeting entertain a discussion about the potential for like opening up and potentially amending or revising the ed specs. While we, while I'm sure the board would still be willing to do that, I think we'll need to take a wait and see approach until some of the town leadership talks in the coming couple of weeks, I believe, to see where things stand, because my understanding is that through some of the things that Graham hinted at, and maybe some other initiatives, there may be a way to close this gap without hitting the ed specs. So if we need to hit the ed specs, I think the board would be amenable and probably will be able to move an action item in time to be able to address that need. But until then, until that's clear, I don't want to overcommit the board because there may be new information coming that we're not we were not privy to during our discussion.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yeah, that's why we just preliminarily came to you. Well, any thoughts on the radiant flooring? I know there was quite a bit of discussion. Do you guys have a consensus on that?
I mean, that, as far as I'm concerned, as of now, everything that has already passed as ed specs by the Board of Ed, that's our ed specs. And if that includes radiant flooring, for younger kids who spend a lot of time on the floor during lessons, then that's what it includes. I'm not so quick to dismiss that personally, but other board members may feel differently, but either way, we would have to have a BOE vote on that. And same thing on square footage of kindergarten classrooms, for example.
Absolutely, understood.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
And just to piggyback on that, the way that this may work depending on timing of meetings is an understanding from the SBC where if any value engineering items were to be contemplated, there could be a conditional amendment to that vote, conditional upon BOE approval of that specs. So that way it's clear and we're not just going back and forth between committee meetings for weeks and weeks. Ultimately, this is timely. So getting Tecton the direction to move in one direction or another with the reduction in classrooms or not is important. But to Seth's point, the ed specs can't be changed without BOE approval. So getting those ducks in a row and making the appropriate appropriately worded motions, I think is a good mechanism to ensure that those sign-offs are made without anyone being circumnavigated in the approval process. Anything else on that before I chop that to the list?
Nope.
I'm good. Thanks,
Um,
Seth.
All right, so any questions on those two concrete items? Otherwise, I can list those as targeted for to be accepted unless there's exception. Okay. Next one is a theatrical lighting item. The theatrical lighting value, the reconciled estimates was in the neighborhood of $120,000 of trade costs. So the idea would be to target the design to 50% of that value. There's not scope to cut necessarily at this point. So that way the design would contemplate approximately $60,000 worth of lighting. Questions there or concerns?
I guess the 120, it's an elementary school, so I assume that that reduced number is a suitable, we feel suitable theatrical
Yes.
lighting for elementary school.
This is
Correct.
Justin from Tecton, yes.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
Next, another constructability item where there was some rigid conduit noted in the design documents. EMT tubing was a little more typical and cheaper. So that was an item that was brought up by Gilbane and acceptable to the design team. Mechanical spaces and that kind of thing. Hearing no questions about that. Next item was, it was an alternate target for gym scoreboards. There was one targeted in the Gilbane estimate. This is a smaller value, but the idea is that it could be provided either potentially as an alternate or whatnot, where all the backup and infrastructure is there. It's just that if the scoreboard wanted to be provided as part of an alternate and bid out if needed as part of the formal process, it could be. But otherwise, it would be savings to the estimate if not provided right away. Again, this would be targeted for an alternate rather than necessarily an outright acceptance of it.
I think are sometimes they provided by vendors through advertising subsidies or things like that. I don't know if that would be something Madison would want to do, but
Yeah, I don't know if that's primed for like a public school as opposed to a university or something like that. But regardless, it could be also, maybe there's FF&E money or something like that, but largely targeted as an alternate, so at least the design is there. And if there is a problem on bid day, it could be not taken then.
sounds good to me.
Okay, I'll put that in the alternate category. This next one is coordination between myself and Bill McMinn about some of the toilet accessories, dispensers for soap and paper towels and things that are often vendor specific rather than being designed and provided for through the project budget. So Bill indicated that a number of items would be going through the town anyway, so wouldn't be part of the construction budget itself. So this item is more or less a clarification rather than a value engineering item of where the monies would be coming from for this scope. Questions there? No? Okay. The next one, this one would be one of the four that would involve ed spec, potential ed spec revisions. This is for a targeted allowance of money for the kitchen equipment. So the ed spec had a number of components to the kitchen equipment. Let me see if I can pull up the ed spec for this. I don't know how well, you should be seeing the ed specs now. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
So all of these items were listed in the ed specs, and when it was priced out, it was a little over $500,000 worth of equipment. Now, moreover, Jeff's team were finding some difficulty in fitting this equipment in the specified square footage for the cafeteria and the kitchen area. So there's a bit of a disconnect there in terms of what was specified versus what could fit anyway. on similar projects, similar recent projects. $350,000 seemed to be a better target for the amount of equipment that would go into the job, and that shown through in some of the estimate reconciliation processes. So that is the target for this value engineering or value management item, is just to basically save on the difference and design the equipment to match that budget, and which would be done in concert with town facilities and town staff. But again, ultimately would change the ed spec in terms of what would be provided.
Is there a cost difference between induction cooking equipment and gas-fired cooking equipment? If we
Might
went
be
to
a better Nick question or Jeff or Justin question.
Not 100% sure on that, Graham. I can look into it and get back to you.
Got it.
If some of the equipment won't fit anyway, we have two problems. So besides the ed spec, we have a physical, this won't fit problem, don't we?
Yeah, I think we're probably gonna take this one unless someone, if the kitchen I assume we have a kitchen consultant on the team.
We
I don't
do.
know.
Yep.
I don't know if they've weighed in. I assume they think that the reduction is a reduction for an elementary school of this size.
The answer is yes. They've been involved in the value management. They understand that it was an awful lot of equipment to fit into the space that was given, and they think they can design a performing, operating kitchen with less equipment. I think the budget numbers were sourced from a variety of different previous recent projects that were similar size. That's why we came up with the 350.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, the origin of the kitchen list on the V, it was a pretty detailed list for a ed spec, so.
Yeah, and just, it is amongst our next steps to validate this with the kitchen food service folks in the district. So that's something that's on our radar to schedule and validate with Bill and his team.
I have a question. Is there any reason we can't move any equipment over from Jeffrey that we already own? Does it all have to be brand new?
I mean,
I don't know if you know.
I can answer that. I don't think that's even the equipment that's there is probably some of the original stoves and stuff. Now we have been taking care of it and maintaining the equipment, and we fix and repair it all the time or when it's needed. But I just don't think that's an option that we would want to do.
Plus their gas, right, Billy?
Right.
Yes, a lot of it is was propane. We did put gas there. I don't know if we converted it to natural gas, but it's originally been propane.
Is there any, I don't think I've heard any exception to this item from this committee standpoint. Obviously, this is an item that would need some coordination with the BOE as part of the ed spec potential changes. But from a value engineering budgetary scope standpoint, is there anyone has any exception to this item? Otherwise, I can flag it as accepted, and then obviously it would need to be coordinated through the BOE separately.
I think that's a good direction. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. Okay. The next item is, or two items are with regard to reducing the amount of canopies. So I'll share a quick visual here to help with this scope. So everywhere in the blue shaded around the building is some fashion of canopy or sunshade, what have you. Tecton took a look at what was originally estimated and identified, I think it was 1,300 square feet of some solid canopy, and then 400 square feet of some more pergola type canopies up in the front that might be eliminated, both because it can still work without it, as well as just a cost saving effort. So this is where that targeted area was that related to those two savings items.
If I can just add, Adam, if you don't mind, this was actually a design element that we had already incorporated by the time it became a value management item. So, you know, we develop our drawings up to SD and to then go through a period of cost estimation. As we were continuing to work on the design and the project, this was an item that we frankly have already incorporated. But it's an item that has been identified as part of the value management. So we recommend you accepting this this item.
It was a lot of canopy. It was a nice feature, but a lot of canopy.
Any questions on these two items? Or concerns?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. The next item is glass overhead doors at the STEM V8 of the courtyard and replacing them with a double person door at each space. So just to go into a quick plan. Originally anticipated at these two areas was a sort of a roll-up door to facilitate access to the outside. So this VE item would maintain access to the outside through just standard double doors to get out in each space rather than having the premium overhead roll-up door. Questions on that? Concerns?
Would that be an alternate? I mean, if the architects feel strongly about it, I mean, I don't know, it's a nice feature, but
Let them identify if it's something that they want to
yeah, I don't know if they want to,
design or not.
probably don't want to draw it twice though. I mean, it depends if they feel strongly about it. I don't know.
Was that item in the first 5 items too?
Yeah, I think, Adam, if you go up to item A5.
That was a different one, I think.
I'm sorry. I see your point. So here, this current B item refers to these two. Item A5 was at these two locations where the SD drawings just showed storefront, but some of the later renderings that came out right after SD showed the full bifold doors to open up the spaces. That's what A5
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Or Jeff and Justin, do you want to talk about it being is an alternate, or is that something that should be taken sooner rather than later?
It certainly could be an alternate. It's easy enough to change the function. We can talk about that later in DD, but for now, moving ahead, we'll just show it as doors as a VE item.
Works for me. Yep.
Okay. The next item is reducing amount of glass at exterior doors. So this is one of the first of a number of items where there was a targeted for reduction in percentage rather than a wholesale elimination. The notion was to not completely gut the building of every single window and finish. Some items are more extensively taken. So one of the later VE items is a 100% elimination of wood ceilings. But obviously, having zero glazing at your exterior doors isn't nice to have. So you'll see a number of these that have a percentage basis to try to offset square footage reductions and having a smaller building with nicer finishes versus having a larger building with nothing in it. Justin,
It's an awfully small number, isn't it, to worry about at this stage?
Justin, can you talk about what glazing currently is at the doors?
Yeah, it's a matter of each door basically having a storefront type door that more or less has a full pane of glass within the door and side lights. There are some select exterior systems, perhaps on the north side of the building, that we can economize that too. We can also incorporate perhaps a larger bottom style in the doors and in the side lights. So this is something that, frankly, as we move forward in design development, we'll have more elevations and whatnot. to evaluate this in. So, I mean, it seems like something that's an easy get. That's something that we would likely be doing anyway as we move forward in design development.
We didn't know the cost value when we developed it, and then came through at a lower value than we thought it might be, but that's why it's on the list, is we didn't want to start taking things off just because it was a smaller value.
Does this reflect ballistic glass or security glass premiums or?
Well, certainly any glazing that we have at grade and at doors is going to be a school guard, an additional enhanced glazing there. So I think this is more about reducing that size of glazing so that you can then reduce the cost associated with it.
Yeah, I no, I understand. I just wondered if it was a premium, would there be more savings if it were priced as a, premium
Yeah,
glass?
that number might be a little bit low, 6,700 for ballistic glass, 25% reduction. We can take another look at that.
Thanks.
What I'll do is I'll leave this one as possible, and then since we have to come back anyway, we can see if there's a reconfirmation of that number. All right, next item. So this one should be a fairly simple one. So there was some general requirements that was identified in the estimate process. This reflects a lot of the sort of administrative stuff that Gilbane will incur as part of just running the job. So Nick and I took a look at it, and there were a number of items that either didn't need to be applicable to this project site or were carried elsewhere in the budget on the owner side of things. It just happened to happen after the estimate reconciliation. So through that process, that's what this line item is. So there's no change in programming or scope. This is more or less just a identification of where savings is coming after the reconciliation number.
You get any more like that? If you got a few more like this, Adam, feel free to throw them out.
I would love to, but I don't think Nick would be too happy if we do more of these reductions. So she does. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll move that into the accepted column. Okay, our first big one here with the geothermal. Obviously, there's later discussions coming up insofar as potential budgetary items, but from a very high perspective, this number contemplates eliminating the wells, eliminating the attendant site work, the manifolds and piping going to the building, that sort of thing, changing over the internal HVAC system units to a more traditional system, and then those are the savings portion of it, and then the putback is including the value for the natural gas line to feed a more traditional system. The sort of the other side of the coin to this is if this number, which is a big number, is taken, then that would eliminate a lot of potential for grants and things coming down the pipe, several $1 million worth if the programs from to the federal government and Eversource and all that hold true. So that's the crux of this topic, is whether or not the project can have sufficient funding within it or within the overall referendum budget in order to get the additional monies and help it back support this project value, or whether or not that's not possible through the bond funding and all that, and would need to be considered as a DE item.
Adam, I think it's important to have the IRA money indicated as a rebate rather than a grant. It's not a grant. It doesn't have to be applied for. And I think that's a real difference to people that do grant writing that say, oh, well, there's a lot involved there and maybe we won't get it. This is not something, as we discussed in our last meeting, that there's any ambiguity any longer about. And therefore, it's something I think that we should say to people: the differential between a conventional system and the geo-exchange system is zero or very close to zero, because the IRA is a definite. And if we use American-made equipment, then we can bump the 30% up to 40%, and then it's cheaper than a conventional system, to say nothing of the fact that it would cost it would save 60% of the expense of operating the system compared to a conventional system. And it would last much longer than a conventional system. And it wouldn't be utilizing fossil fuel. So I think we need to make sure people understand the IRA isn't just something out there we're thinking that we'll get. It's something out there we will get, and we just need to figure out a way to be able to utilize that money. And I hope the meeting tomorrow goes well. Obviously, I'm very hopeful that the meeting goes well. If it doesn't, I think we need to also perhaps think as out of the box as we possibly can to try to get people to recognize that it is in my opinion, totally irresponsible to not put in a system that the federal government is willing to pay us for to make the cost the same or similar than a traditional system that has the benefits that I've just outlined. And there's got to be some way, pull other stuff out, do other things, but I don't want to, I'm sure you're expecting this kind of a response from me, so it's not not a surprise. But if tomorrow's meeting doesn't go well, we shouldn't be taking this out this quickly. We should really, really, really exhaust every possibility and see what else is available to do. By the way, Craig, we're talking about more than 60 tons here, aren't we?
That number I just pulled from the narrative that I saw within the estimate. So it might be, in which case that number would go up. So this is intended to be just approximate values. Obviously, we haven't applied for the rebates
I don't
yet.
think though, if you get one incentive, you can't combine the other. So if you go for path one, everything is in that incentive. I don't believe they incentivize again.
Right. That's why I have this little note here. I wasn't sure what the result was, but point being is, I think to Woody's point is, the federal money is multiple millions of dollars, and then we know through EverSource conversations that path one is somewhere between $90,000 and $315,000 more than if we went down path two without geothermal.
Yeah, that was less for what Energized Connecticut would do and more because of my surprise that that 60 tons would be adequate. That's all. Sorry.
No, we're around 100. We're around 130 tons.
That's what I figured.
That's below the threshold for the IRA. Also, and just so we're clear, so the alternate system, we're talking about a gas-fired boiler hydronic system, right? I mean, we're not talking about other air source heat pumps or anything like that. This is a pure carbon system, right? To get the full value.
That's what this number reflects. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick.
Correct. Yeah, gas-fired hydronic, gas-fired rooftops, and a refrigerant split system from those direct outdoor air handlers to classrooms.
Got it. Okay, that's what I assumed.
And a commensurate reduction in PV capabilities due to shading and equipment. It would just be so irresponsible in this day and age to do that.
So obviously this topic is not going to be resolved tonight, but just point of note for moving forward, and then maybe just Craig and Jeff can talk about this as well. But this is important to resolve before we move headlong into the design development or the rest of design development. We can't sit on this and wait on a wait and see approach until construction documents, and then find out we have to change the entire mechanical system and all the distributed mechanical rooms and redesign everything.
That is 100% correct.
Yeah, you're not designing two buildings for the price of one.
No.
Understood. We got this. This is a critical path.
All right. Unless there's anything else on this topic, we can probably move on to some of the other ones we can review.
I'd like to just make sure, and I don't want to slow you up, Adam, that the other members of the committee and any BOE members understand what we're dealing with here and why I'm so obstinate about it.
I'm crystal clear, Woody. After working with you for 5 years,
Yeah, I didn't mean you.
But anybody, I know, anybody else, and for George likewise is crystal clear. I don't know if anybody else is unclear, but I will make an impassioned plea tomorrow in your case, Woody. But no need, everyone knows, you've preached long enough to Madison. They are, everybody in town understands the issue here.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do everything humanly possible to go above and beyond whatever we need to do to make this happen. So.
Okay, next item, which is actually one of the 4 items that would be an ed spec revision, is the radiant flooring at the kindergarten and pre-K areas. Basically, it would just be heated through the normal system rather through the in concrete slab radiant hydronic system. That would be a couple $100,000 worth of savings.
Well, I agree with Seth about that personally. I mean, obviously, if we're out of money, we're out of money and we do things, but having those kids sitting on a concrete floor, expecting hot air to go down instead of up doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It is just for the younger grades, correct?
Kindergarten, yeah, pre-K and K, yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. I will, because this is also one of the BOE items, and there's a little bit of uncertainty about this one. I'll just keep this one as possible, and we'll revisit this one when we come to this the later meeting.
Perfect.
All right, moving on. Another constructability review item. It was this is G60 versus G90 galvanizing at the some of the duct work and a more typical G60 versus the more expensive G90. So this is one that went through that same process. Combined, got identified it. Tecton suggested it should be okay, and that a saving could be reached. Questions, comments, concerns?
I'm good.
Next, this is an item. It's a little bit smaller, so this one might be a little more scrutinized. This is for the stepped seating area adjacent to the communicating stair. So this is the actual stairway to get down from the upper floor to the cafe area. What we're talking about here is this millwork area here, where it's like the larger steps for students to gather and sit. The number isn't quite as large as I thought it might be when it was originally suggested. So the alternative would be a FF&E solution, but that's up for the committee's consideration.
I like the feature. I have some question if it's the ADA issue or elements, if people in wheelchairs can't access it, but that's a separate kind of issue.
That's Justin. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we design these type of communicating learning stairs in a lot of our schools, providing accessible seating, area or accessible areas at the bottom of the feature is an acceptable ADA solution. We just need to make sure that we have designated areas for wheelchairs to be able to be part of that assembly.
I also, just as an aside, I have heard from other sources that this might not be the most favorable VE item, and given its low value, I'm not sure what Tecton feels about this potentially waiting until CD if it was really necessary to have this $7,000. But I don't know
You
that
know my
there'd
feelings on it, so.
be. Yeah. So if the committee wanted to keep this value, and at this point, I don't know that 7,000 is going to break the bank at
I think
SD phase.
I'm leaning towards keeping it. I think it's a really nice feature that would be utilized a lot by the school, and I do think it's pretty minimal.
Yeah, thoughts? Otherwise, I'll mark it as rejected and we can go on to the next one.
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. One of those wild spaces for $6,000. I can see it in the photographs already.
We'll put a plaque with your name on it, Graham.
Yeah, when we get to the naming opportunities, keep me in mind.
All right, the next one.
Justin, have you guys talked to other schools about their usage after you've put them in?
Yes, we have. It does take a little bit of educational kind of commissioning, if you will, to talk about how to use them, the intended design, but we do see them used quite a bit in kind of project-based learning opportunities. So yes.
Would imagine so. Thank you.
Okay, next one is a reduction, 50% reduction in storefront at the STEM Visual Arts Media Center corridor. So effectively, this corridor. So the item one of the top 5 items I talked about was just that these were bifold doors. This VE item is that half the storefront that was bid would be replaced just with gyp wall. So
Is that
still
on
have
looking over the cafeteria side as well, or just the corridor?
just the corridor. There is a topic in a couple lines here that will deal with this, but we're not there yet.
Okay, sorry.
No. There's a lot of these items. That's why I wanted to show the visual because it can get confusing. So Jeff and Justin chime in, but I believe this would still maintain at least an initial visual into both spaces, so it's making that open sort of feel. But some of these later panels would be removed. Is that the intent?
Yes. Yeah, I still think we can achieve kind of the original mission with some reduction.
Thoughts, concerns? Otherwise, can I mark this as accepted?
I'm good. Yep.
Next one. This was the one item that was targeted as 100% elimination. It was a big dollar value. Was wood grill ceilings. Justin, Jeff, I don't know where this makes screen sharing, but where were these predominantly targeted and located?
In the public areas, in the kind of 2-story spaces, and so we had identified. Now, again, this is kind of on a conceptual level. We had indicated this in the basis of design. So it's more or less in those locations: entrance, the areas over the cafeteria, in some of our wider corridors, etc. So, understanding that it's a premium, we can take a look at, we would still advocate a portion of those areas to be specialty ceilings, but we can likely take a look at, economizing the total breadth of them.
Well, I think this eliminates them, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
But there are other alternatives you can use for specialty ceilings, though, correct?
Yes.
you could, they'd come at a premium, but there are less expensive or more economical ways to get an accent ceiling, correct? Yep.
Any thoughts on this item? Questions, comments? No? Okay. Next item. Infill one side of the stage by the cafe. So this item would be for the platform here, maintaining the opening and partitions and drapes and things facing the gymnasium. But the VE item would basically infill this portion of the wall. So it wouldn't be, you could have operations and performances to both sides. It would just be solely focused on the gym.
I would keep it as a possible. I think it's a nice feature to have it open, but it's not a super big chunk, but it's a big enough chunk that If we could save it, it'd be nice. In my humble opinion.
Jeff and Justin, is this, I know some of the items are just, drapery specs and the removable partition. Is there any issue with having this be an alternate?
No, what we could do is we could size the structure and put it in, and then if it's not affordable, then we can just fill in the wall with regular construction. So that way in the future, if you ever needed it, you have this infrastructure there to do it. So we're fine with that.
Okay, I'll flag it as an alternate unless there's opposition otherwise.
Help to oversee the relocation efforts of moving the central
Okay,
office
fair enough.
to the
The quantity of millwork versus FF&E. So this one is another one of more of a clarification than a VE item. So in the classrooms, how well this shows it, but there's typically sort of 2 rows of storage and items like that. One of the items was storage of bookcases and things, and the other ones were the cubbies. And I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, the cubbies and the wardrobe were intended to be millwork, but the other storage items were intended to be FF&E. But in the estimates, everything was millwork, so it inflated the value.
I can jump in here, Adam. Yes, that is the intent, is to provide more furniture solutions, to provide more flexible arrangement within each classroom.
And per our discussions, that should work within the FF&E budget that's been targeted for the project, correct?
We assume so, yes.
Okay. So again, this one's less of a VE item and more of a budgetary confirmation. So unless there's any exceptions to that, I'll accept it. We can move on to the next one. All right, next one is the premium storefront at the media center. So going back to the plans, into Sharon's commentary. So at the, we'll call it the back side of the media center overlooking the cafe, there was the reconciliation and estimate process had this storefront as a more premium storefront rather than a standard storefront. So the VE effort is not to eliminate the storefront, but to not have it be the premium version of it. Is that right, Nick, with what you guys had estimated?
Mute here. Yeah, that's correct.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Does that storefront go all the way down to the floor? Is it like to a counter height? So you have case goods below it? Or are we taking away from library space?
So I believe the estimate had assumed that that is kind of floor to ceiling storefront at that location. What we have recognized as the design intent is likely to have some sort of from windowsill height down, some storage, some book and stack storage, and have the visibility from, say, 36 inches or 42 inches and above down into the cafeteria.
Okay, that probably saves some money then too.
Yeah. And the fins are at this point, or certainly at the time that we were drawing them in SD, were a conceptual notion about having some sort of built-in acoustic treatment that was part of the wall assembly, because that cafeteria double height space off of 2 separate corridors is going to be a loud area if we do not provide appropriate acoustic treatment within that space. So there's likely a more cost-sensitive solution than I think what was originally contemplated in the SD package.
Beyond what's represented here, potentially?
Yes.
Well, you have to put it back, something back, right?
So the decision now is just to eliminate the first premium, and then there's potentially other savings, but it also might be a trade-off to ensure that the acoustics is right. So for right now, the decision is just on that initial take. And then the design development process can go from there.
Perfect. So I think we're okay to take it then. Everyone agrees.
Good. Next item is for tack strips at the classrooms. So there's no visual for this per se. In the estimate, they had whiteboards and tack boards in all the classrooms, but also an additional tack strips that amounted to over 40 grand worth of value. So that's what this line item is representing.
That's not in FF&E.
Sorry, I'll answer that. Sharon, what, for those type of items that we want some control over where they're installed and any blocking that might be required for them, whether or not it's an applied solution or a fastened one, we want the general trades contractor to have control over that installation rather than a trade between, general trades and then an FF&E installer. There are other cases where that would be applicable. For instance, any type of wall-mounted, monitors or anything like that, but anything that's permanently fastened or kind of adhered to the wall, we want that to be part of the carpenter doing the work.
Understood. Thank you.
No problem.
Concerns, questions? Okay. Next item. So this is third of 4 ed spec related components. This one is with regard to in-room restrooms for grades 1 and 2. So I'll pull up the plan here. So with your pre-K and your kindergarten, they have these single restrooms for the younger students. The ed specs also called for individual restrooms for grades 1 and grades 2. As part of the overall potential square foot reduction for classrooms, which we'll talk about at the end of the list, there was a notion that having these individual restrooms, Tecton has seen this work with alternative schemes, not necessarily having a restroom for each individual grade 1 and grade 2. So the value as part of this VE item is strictly for the reduction in fixtures. So the value is just to have these basically become one and have one toilet, one sink. There's also a potential through the design development exercise to have these more consolidated into the gang style bathrooms that you have for grades 3, 4, and 5 on a different floor. But for right now, the value that was intended to be taken was more conservative at just eliminating the fixtures. Probably didn't do it fully justice. If Justin or Jeff want to talk about it more in terms of what the potentials could be, but that's the notion behind this this particular VE item.
I personally think we don't get rid of them. I mean, I understand maybe doing one toilet, one sink for 2 classrooms, but I think at that grade level, you want them accessible from the classroom.
Which is what this VE item reflects in terms of the value as of
Okay,
right now.
yeah, I wouldn't ever entertain doing less than that.
Any questions, comments? Otherwise, it sounds like Mark, this is accepted with the notation of not trying to explore a centralized gang bathroom for grades 1 and 2, and just keep it as sort of accessible from each classroom, but just one toilet, one sink from the classroom. Is that my hearing?
And that's a Board of Education item anyway, right?
That would still require Board of Education approval because it's not a dedicated restroom for each classroom. Yes. Okay. Moving on, now we get into some of the site plan items. There's a fair bit of money within the site for exploration. The first item, and this one's a one of the ones that was targeted for as an alternate, is for eliminating the sidewalk and formal seating areas for the pollinator path walkway. So on the site plan visual, that's this item number 1 that kind of loops around the turf field and back. So the idea is that it would be a more natural walk as part of base scope. And then as an alternate, there could be paving and things of that nature to go around with seat walls and something more built up. But as a minimum, it would be just a natural walk.
Would we have, I think there's an ADA requirement potentially to, if we have spectators areas down there?
Possibly. We talked about this with the landscape architect as well. I think where we get into trouble is where we create these formalized paths all the way around the entire field. And I think we can get proper accessibility to the field and equal access. But I think the orange shaded area is something, it's a bit aggressive. We don't often.
Yeah, you don't need that much. You might need just one side, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the pollinator gardens, that's a big plus for the land trust people, so I don't know, just taking out the path and the pollinator garden, or just. It could be something we could work with the land trust to develop a natural trip path that we could share.
That's exactly what my suggestion was, to make it more natural. There'll be a kind of graded and paved area near the play to get you equal access to this area, and then maybe it's more of a natural walk, and then the outdoor classrooms can still occur. They just don't need to be as formal as they were designed.
Yeah, I think it's probably overkill anyway, so.
Yeah, so I agree.
This was a key component of the project, and particularly with the lands trust discussions, which is why it was vetted to be an alternate target and not just a straight elimination from the project wholesale.
Right, so we need a path, but it doesn't have to be a paved path, and it probably wouldn't be a paved path anyway, so.
So unless there's other concerns, I'll mark it as an alternate.
I'm sorry. The things like that are probably not required by the state, right? Or by code or by anything. Couldn't things like that be taken out of the project and simply done by the town at the same time to utilize the funds that come to them? I mean, can't we investigate or at least make sure we've got every option open for this?
That's effectively what we're doing in a sense. So when we move something into an alternate, it's coming out of the base scope. So the 9.9 million that we're talking about here, when something's moved to an alternate, it's removed from the base budget scope of what the base bid would be and moves to an alternate. So if it did want to be taken out by the town, 5 minutes after the project or 5 years or as part of an alternate as part of the bid, it allows that flexibility. So we're reducing that 9.9 million.
No, I get that. I'm just thinking of ways to use $3 million.
Yeah, if it was not accepted as part of the project,
not have it be part of the project, therefore it just takes it out. We do, there's no requirement to do all the site work that we have. We can do, I guess, I'm famous for thinking out of the box and getting myself into very big trouble very quickly. But I'm just thinking about things like that could, the $3 million check coming from the IRS, the town can spend any way it wants. And that's the whole problem with this. Can we bring things that are not contractually and legally necessary into a separate pile the town handles?
So the ball field, is the ball field in the ed spec explicitly? There was some confusion at one point. For example.
Check, to be honest.
I mean,
while I'm looking at this, to your point, Woody, that's more or less what we're doing. Is, for example, this pollinator path is taken out of that project budget for that $9.9 million difference. And so the more that we can push as alternates or in later VE items, the more that could be considered by the town for later work. Point being is that value is already part of the 6 million that we're talking about here. So anything else would need to be at top of that if we're trying to offset for geo, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, that's why I asked what else could be done. I mean, I knew that wasn't gonna, 200 grand wasn't gonna do it.
Yeah, I assume we could take the ball field as an alternate. I don't think we identified the ball field as an alternate. It was shown in all the things shown to the public.
It does reference fields. To be honest, I don't think we're going to solve this on this call in terms of diving into what it's specifying.
Yeah.
But that's something we can look into. So I can flag that as an item to circle back on between now and the next SVC meeting.
But to Woody's point, that would be something we could come in if we could want to remove it from the ed spec and then put it back in.
If not in the ed spec, or if the Board of Education is amenable to removing it from the ed spec, if it is in there. There's no code requirement that I'm aware of for having a soccer field. Make a note of that. Okay. Now I'll restart the screen here. Okay, so I've moved that into the alternate for the pollinator pathway. Next item is eliminating sidewalk and remote areas of drop-off and pickup. So the notion here is that the pickup and drop-off happens closer to the building, so having a full wraparound sidewalk to the extent it was originally shown didn't seem necessary as part of the VE take. So it's these orange areas here. I forget if there's one up top here as well. Yes. Questions on that item? Okay, mark that as accepted. Next one, the infamous bluestone pavers. So that was at a number of locations at some entrances and at the courtyard. So the cost delta there is to provide just stamped concrete, so it still maintains some aesthetic appeal, but at a much reduced price. Is there any other questions?
I assume we could go to plain concrete if we had to, a few bucks a square foot reduction, further reduction.
That's correct, yeah. And you could also color it. You can put a nickel color in there and then still save a few bucks.
But we're
All
not
right.
so we'll take the bluestone out, which is a nice feature, but I'm sure maintenance wise, it's probably long-term longevity of the bluestone in a public school probably might be a little problematic anyway.
Potentially for the stamped as well, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so another item that's for an alternate target. This is for consolidating from 3 playgrounds to 2. The ed specs didn't specify a number of playgrounds, just that there were to be playgrounds. So on the original SD plan, there were 3 playgrounds shown. So the idea is that there would be a younger playground area and one for the older kids on the other side of the building. And that as an alternate, it would be included a biz, but not part of the base bid scope for the playground here. This item was an FF&E targeted item, so not necessarily within the main construction scope. So what would happen is if the town chose to go down this route, inevitably there would be a shift in money from some of the owner provided items or separately provided items to the construction budget to help offset some of the difference. And again, this would be targeted for an alternate, so it'd still be designed out.
Okay, yeah. I assume it's desirable to have to split them and have different age groups, not mixed, but it's a K5, right? So probably not that much of a problem.
It was something that came up in our reviews to have a lower K, pre-K and K playscape, lower elementary, upper elementary. So different types of playscapes between the grades 1 and 2 and 3 and 5.
Got it.
Can it be combined in one play area, which is different level, or is that too complicated to control the kids?
That is what was, I think, originally contemplated in the ed spec.
So are we gonna keep an alternate for the 3 fields, the 3rd field, or do we want to just consolidate the design and have one, just 2?
To comment on some of the working group meetings with the teacher liaisons and the admin, I recall there being a preference for having the 3 if possible, which is why this was targeted as an alternate and not just a straight VE ad.
Okay, that works for me.
Same. I think we defer to the professionals on that one.
Okay, next item is eliminating the second tier seat wall and instead just utilizing the hillside and some lawn and boulder seating. So that is at the south main entrance here. We're sort of a terraced approach, and the idea is to eliminate just the second tier of it. So that would still be this first tier.
Nice feature, but I think we gotta give something up, so I'm okay with cutting it. I mean, it's still got the slope, so you get 90% of the effect, in my opinion.
I would agree. Yeah.
Next item, kind of 2 items. So eliminating some fencing, a 4-foot fence around the pickup drop-off area and the 10-foot fence at the basketball court. I know there was some review here with regard to extent of fencing, purpose, etc. So around the basketball court, this would be the 10-foot fence. And then there's some fencing here around the parking area, but still having the drop off in between the parking and the school. I don't think there was parking up here. So it's like, no. So it's these 2 areas. Comments, questions? Okay.
Is the short fence intended to avoid people running across the bus loop, I assume? That was the intent of that short fence? Number 6 there?
That's the
Yes.
parent drop, but yeah, same thing. Yeah, but it can be handled differently, more economically. With landscaping.
All right. Moving on to the next topic. Playground poured surface to wood chips. Again, this is an item that would be for the playgrounds that was contemplated through the separate owner side furniture, fixtures, equipment scope. So the idea is here is rather than have the poured surface, instead replacing it with wood chips. I know there's been some pushback on this one just from a maintenance standpoint. Wood chips, as soon as you start playing with them, they get everywhere, and it's not as clean and tidy as the poured surface. So this one also maybe could be an ultimate target.
Is that based on 2 or 3 playgrounds?
This is for 2, so it's separate from, assuming the other one was already taken. This is just for the 2. The poured surface is expensive, but it is a nicer, longer term solution for sure.
How long do they last? What's
That's
the
a good
lifespan?
question. And I don't know offhand. I don't know
They
if Jessica or Jeff-
They typically actually need to be recoded my understanding is every 5 to 10 years. Bill, you actually have some over at Brown. I don't know what your experience has been in terms of when they need to be recoded. This is the poured in place playscape surface.
So my experience is 3 of them, one not ours, but I saw it going at the same time as the Town Campus Learning Center. And it's really the quality of the construction. The one that I saw that wasn't ours held up really well. and I was just impressed with it versus the one we put at the Town Learning Center. We spent a little time and money, always seemed to fixing it up and maintaining it. So I don't know, it's been in probably 20 years and we've definitely, replaced sections of it once and done some significant work on it twice in the last 20 years, just off the top of my head. The one at Brown School is holding up really well. I think it's 3 years old and doesn't look at all, of it needing anything. It's in great shape. But that was my understanding. Every 5 years, we need to, maybe recode it and check it and make sure that it's maintaining properly. But I think its installation is the key. I would estimate five-year heavy maintenance, 10 years, consider replacing it, but I think it would last longer. And I don't know that. I didn't look at the manufacturers or do any hard analysis. It's just my estimate from seeing it and looking at them.
What's the maintenance factor on wood chips?
Wood chips, we have at all our schools. Off the top of my head, we spend about, 2 to 4 or 5 grand every year. Putting more wood chips in, they sort of decompose. And that, that surface, as long as we take care of it and maintain it, it costs between 2,000 to 5,000 a year. We put in wood chips and raking them in. And obviously the wood chips move. It's really important about the surface in the falling height. So the wood chips, although they're natural and they decay and we can put them in, they're probably not as a nice a surface as the, hard rubber, which is not hard rubber, it's, bouncy rubber. So it's much nicer, easier to play with, easier to maintain, easier for ADA compliance, more diversified uses are much easier with the, the rubber surface. So it's definitely I would say a nice to have, maybe even should have, relative to ADA and compliance for other kids that want to get on to the play surfaces versus the wood chips are fine. They're just not as nice.
They're also terribly difficult to get out of cuts from falling. I've seen my kids used to have that issue and just saw it in one of the grandkids recently. You run, you trip, your knee goes down, and it's not great compared to the other surface.
So what are you proposing here, that you possibly take it out, or it's an add alternate, or?
So that's up to the committee. So this is an item that could be considered for an add alternate. It's with the exception of a bit of a grade difference. It's mostly just a materiality change. So it could be an alternate, and we can continue to show that on the drawings as such, or the bid documents later on when we go out to bid for the playground equipment. Or it could be accepted or rejected straight away. So this one has some flexibility as to what the committee's desire is in terms of keeping it in or a wait and see approach.
I'd like to keep it in, but I guess we can wait and see. How does the school board feel about it? Dr. Cook, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, sorry, I'm chiming in the first time on playgrounds. But I actually, I agree with Bill in terms of the importance. It is at Brown already, and it is much better for ADA compliance. So a student in a wheelchair can access the playground much better when it's the harder surface. So we'd really like to keep that in if possible.
So would I.
Thank you.
Whatever that's worth.
There'll be some naming opportunities later on, Sharon. So
am I hearing mark it as an alternate then and not reject it?
yeah, put an alternate. I think it makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is reducing underwater stormwater retention and providing additional above ground basins. So there are a number of stormwater components where the water just goes, it's underneath the ground, underneath parking lots and things. There were 6 such retention devices. Tecton coordinated with their site designer and identified that they eliminate many of those and instead just provide an above ground retention pond, potentially just above where the geothermal wells would theoretically be. And that would result in a pretty substantial savings, 320 grand.
Just curious, how deep is that retention pond?
Would have to be a few feet to make it worth building it. So
You need 5-foot coverage over the geothermal field, so. As long as that works, I don't know.
They haven't been designed yet, but the intent would be that they'd be shallow basin because we
Okay.
obviously don't want standing water in any of these.
Okay,
yeah, it's subject to approval by the town engineer through the planning and zoning process anyway, so, but I think
Right.
we can target it and
Yeah,
figure it out.
the general concept was to get the stormwater out of underground basins that cost a lot of money.
Understood. It'll be a lot easier if we take the VE on the geothermal wells, obviously, but we'll have to work a little harder, but yeah.
All right. I'll note that down. That's accepted. We can move on. Loading dock scissor lift. So right now the drawings contemplate having a separate mechanical scissor lift next to the loading dock. Trucks often come with their own lift gates. So the savings would be for eliminating the scissor lift. Bill, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on that.
We don't have them at any of the other elementary schools. The only place that we have a half dock is at the high school and Polson. We have a full dock, so. You know, we deal with it at all the other schools. I don't know why. Actually, Brown School has a dock, loading dock, so. You know, we can handle it.
Okay.
Take it.
Next, eliminating sod at the turf field and instead phasing it such that it could be established earlier on with seed. So this is separate from the potential for deferring the field altogether, which we need to look into, but even with just maintaining it in the project, just having it be the more economical seed establishment versus sod.
Could be an alternate, depending on season, timing, but yeah.
I can mark it an alternate if you want.
As opposed to eliminating it altogether?
Yeah, that would be, I mean, if we would consider taking it, it'd be just taking it right away and having that to be the basis versus having it be a separate line item as an alternate. Generally don't want to have too many items try to be alternates, in which case
Yeah,
the
I
drawings are
I
just.
wouldn't include it as an alternate. I don't think it's that important.
No, I mean, there's some sod around the building timing wise, but yeah, I think that you can actually get a better feel, I think, if you grow it from scratch anyway. At least that's what experts will tell you.
All right, I'll mark it as accepted then. Next item, this is just more of a site balancing item. So when going through the estimation processes, the estimators did their cuts and fills, and it was noted that based on the plans for schematic design, there would have been some amount of import export. I forget which it was, or maybe both. So the notion was just to better balance the site, which would likely result in some higher berms potentially around the perimeter, but that could also be used to help identify some privacy concerns. So there might be a sort of a double positive here with some cost savings and with helping better enclose the site with just the natural soil on hand.
Sounds like a great idea.
Very good. All right, accepted. Next. Reduction of landscaping allowance. So this was I just posed to the design team about how much plantings we needed as part of the base scope. So the idea is just to cut off a little bit of the overage there and take it down to an allowance of $350,000 in design landscaping to fit that dollar value. So not a huge wholesale change, but some additional amount of money's there.
Does
I
that,
would think go ahead, Graham, sorry.
does that include turf establishment, or that's not just plantings? Is that turf establishment also?
This number, I believe, was just from plantings, not including the sod.
Brent, I
which
can
was a
make
separate-
it larger. The problem is you're gonna start losing some of the columns to the left or right, so I'll do my
This was
best.
a tacked on an item. Gilbane priced it out, so they should probably confirm what that that includes.
Yeah, I believe that was plantings. And to Woody's point earlier, could that be something that, gets done after the fact with the rebate money?
I don't know if there's any specific zoning requirements for planting. Sometimes they have buffers and things like that. I don't recall seeing them, but that would be the minimal we'd have to do if there is a zoning.
Right.
Sometimes for islands, sometimes, et cetera, but I think we could, if we have, we can reduce it. I think we can go lower, and I think Bill would prefer to minimize the landscaping other than zoning.
I'm all in favor of the landscaping is something that we can't handle very well. Minimal landscaping, trees, a few trees and some grass, screening the neighbors is something we want to be, considering, but we don't need that stuff around the building. It doesn't, do anything for us other than cause us grief and aggravation. So I'm all for minimal landscaping. I can't say that strong enough.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill.
So yeah,
I think with the allowance that I identified, there'd be some fodder there to still work through the wetlands area and working with the.
yeah, we definitely want to have a pollinator garden, but I think that 350 would buy a lot of plant stock. That's why I'm wondering whether it's more comprehensive, that has other items in it. Maybe topsoil or something like that, just to see what's in that 350. That's a lot of plant stock for an elementary school.
So it sounds like we accept it, and maybe there's more room.
Yeah,
later,
exactly.
but for now,
Minimally accepted and targeted for more. I'm sure the landscape architect hates to hear that, but the high school planted up pretty good. I think we got enough plantings in the high school to last.
All right, coming down the home stretch here, last site item, there was granite curbing identified in the schematic design phase. This price is to make it simple concrete, not the more expensive granite. It's a pretty good chunk of money there.
Yeah, I assume the town doesn't have a requirement for granite curbing. And we potentially target some bit curbing reductions later on, other than immediately in front of the building. Or go with a concrete, or, not a full depth concrete if we had to. But I would suggest we take the granite unless there's a zoning requirement for granite. And then we can look for possibly other items later.
Okay, very good. And the last two items are with regard to the size of the building. So this is a portion of it specs with regard to programming. Another portion of it is just with regard to circulation. So we'll kind of look at these in tandem when I pull up the plans here. But the first item is for just tightening the building footprint from hallways and circulation. So lack of a better term, reducing vestibule sizes, taking some hallways, making them a little narrower than they were in the schematic design process. So it's about 2,000 square feet. And then the other portion of this that was defined by the ad spec is selectively targeting some perimeter spaces, predominantly classrooms, and reducing some of those sizes by bringing in the exterior walls. So I'll bring up the plans here. So at a high level perspective, and I can zoom in as we go through this real quick, but anywhere in blue would be the targets for bringing in the exterior walls. And largely you see here, there's kindergarten, pre-K, and all the other grades around the perimeter of the building. And there are a few adjacent areas that would be affected by these. So for example, there's a world language classroom next to grade 2 that's on the same exterior wall. So the square footage there would be targeted for a slight reduction. And then
What is the percentage of reduction in each of the classrooms when you do this?
So it varies, and I'll pull up the space by space breakdown here in a moment. You can see where those each are. The orange areas, those are the circulation areas that I talked about that are not programmatic in nature. And then anywhere you see purple are items where there's some shifting that's occurring. Some of it has already happened to align some of the areas that we're missing in the ed spec or otherwise need to be reconfigured. So for example, up here at the cafeteria area, by the faculty dining, there was some extra square footage and there was some shortage of storage. So those would be areas that are targeted to meet the storage requirements of the ed specs. And Tecton's already been working on this since schematic design. So for example, this faculty area already in the current plans includes a storage area to meet that difference in square footage that was required by the ed specs. So going on to the room by room or area by area breakdown, for the full day kindergarten, ed specs had an 1,100 square foot programmatic requirement. The target would be 1,000 square foot. So just under 10% reduction there. For grades 1 and 2, I would go from 940 to 850. For grades 3 to 5, 890 to 850. Some of the adjacent spaces, the music choral room was already targeted to be about 950, and there's some storage areas that would go from 1,000 down to 950. World Cleaners classroom 890 to 850. Pre-K from 1,000 down to 900. And then some attendant other areas that would be impacted. One of which came out of the discussions with some of the teacher liaisons and administrative working group meetings. The school psychologist's office and the main office area were targeted for potential gross square footage changes, where the front secretarial area would shrink a bit, but the psychologist area office, pre-K psychologist office would expand a bit to make room for the extra staff that was identified by the principal or by a potential principal. And then again, some just adjacent areas with the base classroom going from 890 to 850, and the one teacher workroom that's on an exterior wall, potentially going from 440 to 350. So this is the. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, are the functions within each room, as far as number of students, all the things they need to teach and do, still fit? It's just like extra floor space that's getting removed?
I can let Justin and Jeff talk about that more in detail, but there was some other potential square footages. We weren't sure if kindergarten could go down to 900. These shook out as a higher value to help accommodate some of that. I don't know if Jeff and Justin want to expound on that a bit.
I can speak to the kindergarten. We looked at the 900. We wouldn't advise going down that low. We think 1,000 is appropriate based on the various different uses that you typically see in pre-K and K. The elementary drop for grades 1 through 5 is the square footage reduction. You still can perform all the same functions. It offers obviously a little bit less flexibility, but you could still perform all the same functions in a slightly less or slightly smaller classroom. We see on average classrooms for these grade levels range anywhere from the high 700s to 850, 900. So and they all seem to function across all our projects. So we think we can get those functions to work in short. Are they going to be tighter and maybe have less flexibility? Yes, but they'll still perform the proper function.
And the Board of Ed will have to approve these changes because it's outside the ed spec?
Correct. It would be a functional change to what was in the ed spec. So anything shown on this sheet would need approval by the Board of Education as a modification.
How do we know how these compare to the current classroom sizes at Jeffrey, and then what the classroom sizes will be at Brown when Brown is Ryerson?
They're larger.
What is larger?
These classroom sizes.
The cut down classroom sizes?
Correct. Well, I can't speak for Jeffrey because I don't have his intimate knowledge, but I can speak for Brown because we have been doing work within Brown. There's a wide variety of classroom sizes at Brown. Our new kindergarten and 1 classrooms are in the 850 square foot range.
Okay.
And those are on average larger than the other classrooms at Brown.
Thank you.
No problem.
So this item, because it's a pretty substantial change, and because we have another school building committee meeting that we'll need to get to finalize this entire list, particularly with geothermal. I don't know that we need to decide anything tonight on this, but point being, this was a key topic and a key focus that was presented to the Board of Education last week. So they're aware of it. Obviously, they didn't vote or make any clear indications one way or the other, but this was the classroom reduction sizes, the exterior walls getting brought in was the concept shown.
Can you go back to the slide with how much money this saves us?
So between the two, just under $500,000.
Do we lose anything significant with tightening the hallways in regards to kind of it as an educational space, or is there a value between the different sizes?
I'd look to you on that one.
It's, I mean, we set up the plan for what we think is the optimal kind of spacing. So they were set up on a 10-foot grid line. So you had, 9.5 feet, almost a clear space down your hallway. When we've done other projects in several other schools where you'll see in that tan or orange color there, where they are that size, and they still function just fine. There's still these pockets of opportunity for breakout spaces within the building layout that we wouldn't likely lose. So to answer your question, is it, the optimal where we started? No, where we started is what we show. Will it work and function well and be feel appropriate and service the school fine? Yes.
Nobody's going to say, oh, I wish I had that extra foot.
Well, I will, but I wouldn't say that out loud. So.
Okay.
I think the way you designed the hallways and the skewed portions of the building actually lends itself to taking out, because you do have more space than in different areas of the hallway. And I think that is nice that you did it that way.
I don't want to share all the secrets, right, Shannon? No, but
Sorry.
I agree. I think there's plenty of circulation paths here to not worry about capacity issues, I guess. So.
Questions on this item? Otherwise, I was going to mark it, just leave it as possible along with the geothermal, because this is obviously a fairly more impactful one. So
If the school board's good with it, I'm good with it.
Okay. With that is the end of our list for tonight. So as part of, stop sharing here so you can see each other again. So I don't think a motion needs to be made at this point, because there are still some outstanding items on the list, and in terms of bringing alignment to moving forward to DD, I don't think that's is achieved with where we're at right now. So we'll target, work with Graham and Raquel, if it's the SBC's agreement to target a special meeting here in the next week or two, whenever it's possible. Once we have some clarity on the funding issue and geothermal and those items, and then reconvene. And then as part of that next meeting, the updated log, I'll share that as part of the packet. And then as part of that subsequent meeting, when decisions are made about the geothermal and the square foot reductions, and I think there's one or two other items, then the committee can then vote on that comprehensive list and ideally move us on to design development phase. So with that, I think, unless there's any other questions or comments, that's what was on the docket for tonight for this topic.
Thank you, everyone. I think you did a good job with the value engineering stuff and presenting it, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Oh, well, Graham, you're muted.
Bill and I are on the Board of Selectmen meeting simultaneously, so bear with me on the that. So I'll just go through the last public comments. Any public comment? I don't think so. Remarks, I think anyone will make a motion to adjourn?
I do.
Okay, all in favor, second? I'm sorry, second.
Aye.
Aye, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll see you in a
Thank you.
second, Bill. Okay, take
Have
care.
a
Great
nice
Thank
job.
you. Happy
Bye-bye.
holidays,
Have a
everyone.
nice
Yep,
holiday.
happy holidays. Thanks all.
Take care.
Thank you.